because, you know, like we said at the very start of the show, we have a team on our hands here who are, the league's in the bag and they're off in their jollies. That's how good things are at the moment. So kind of the focus sort of changes a little bit to the other things that are still available. And we know that the relegation thing was sorted out. So I think the Premier League must be counting their lucky stars that there's such competition for the Champions League places, which at least makes the whole thing a little bit interesting. And we do have the very real situation of maybe up to 6 English players or teams involved in the Champions League next year, which is a bit wild. As you look at the table as it stands, Jan, what's your feeling for how things run in here? We've got Arsenal sitting on 68 points, Newcastle on 66, City on 65, Chelsea 63, and Villa 63, with Forest a point off that in 62. Now Forest have dropped away a little bit, but you know, it's incremental. There's only 6 points available to everybody at this stage. What are your feelings on where the final shake-up lands? Because obviously it'll depend on the fixtures. I'm not sure if you have those in front of you, but I can get those up anyway if you want to talk about that.
I've got a pretty good idea. Arsenal in second, they play Newcastle at home and Southampton away.
Yeah,
they need a couple of points, and they're going to pick up points at Southampton, even if they can't beat Newcastle. And you know, looking at the latest with their squad and the red card against Liverpool and the injury to Trossard and whatever, they're going to find difficulty to even field 11 senior players. And Newcastle got everything to play for because they can then seal Champions League with a win. So Manchester City are going to be okay. They found a bit of defensive stability by playing Ruben Dias and Guardiola together as centre halves. That they look really, they're not playing any better going forward as such, but they've stopped leaking goals. Newcastle, I'm absolutely convinced, will get the points to be in there as well. And I'm kind of hoping Chelsea on Friday play Manchester United. Now, it will be yet another excuse for Manchester United to play the reserves and the kids because they got a Europa League final next week. So that's almost like a free hit for Chelsea. They're going to win that game. But I just hope that Nottingham Forest can win their game, because then at least we get a final day final in Nottingham between Nottingham Forest and Chelsea for that last, because I just can't see how Aston Villa are going to manage to sneak themselves in there. So I'm most likely to think at the moment that we're going to go with Liverpool, Arsenal, Manchester City, Newcastle, and Chelsea, which is a change from when we did it a few weeks ago, because I said Forest, and you couldn't envisage Forest, I think, losing 5 out of the last 7, only taking 4 points, you know what I mean? But that's the state they're in at the moment.
Isn't it interesting to look at the table, though? And if Newcastle win their last 2 games, they will finish second. That is quite a remarkable situation when you look at it. And I'll be honest with you, I'll be honest, I did not see that coming. And I've wondered a lot about their coach and how long he would be allowed to stay in that job. And, you know, that when he rolled into this season, I was surprised. But you can't argue with a lad who could be about to get his team into second place with 2 wins. And
a trophy.
And a trophy, mate. And a trophy. So, I mean, it's possibly third, and a trophy is better than Arsenal finishing second. So it's already a tremendous season. And I think an awful lot of people, very much myself included, were a little bit, well, jury's out on this lad. And I don't know whether that's the reverse of the English bias that used to be there all the time, whereas now I find myself sort of bristling against that and you know, far more receptive maybe to foreign managers, which is daft in and of itself. But you can't argue, can you? I mean, I understand they have money, they bought in great footballers, but they haven't gone big in the way that, say, City did back in the day. There is a little bit more of a structured, cohesive way to go at it. And again, unlike City, who threw a lot of money at high-profile coaches, the biggest names, they're not doing that. They're sticking with Eddie Howe, and he seems to be rewarding them.
Yeah, but I do think very much the plan was, though, the first time there's any trouble, you know, we got a list of people we would like to replace Eddie with. But for as long as things go the way they have done, he's a safe pair of hands. I think the whole thing with Eddie Howe is that when he was at Bournemouth, he went to Burnley, that didn't work out, and then he came back to Bournemouth. And I think it's fair to say that there was a certain amount of naivety about the way that he managed and the way that he sets up his teams. And you think, will there ever be a big job for him? And then he was waiting, wasn't he? He was out of the game, and he went to Atletico Madrid and spent a lot of time with Diego Simeone, which is about small margins in the games. You know, what can you do to affect the result? And he wasn't necessarily talking about, you know, playing well. He was talking about the dark arts of the game. So when you look at Newcastle, there's a lot of shithousery going on at Newcastle, isn't it? You know, then there is in it, Trev. You look at the midfield three; they are horrible to play against. Three, you know what I mean? Yeah, they're horrible to play against, aren't they? But there's a bit of Jurgen Klopp about him, isn't it? In terms of the intensity and the pace he likes to have in his team. So I have to be honest. Generally, I enjoy watching Newcastle play. How far he will at some stage come under the same pressure as Mikel Arteta. You know, and that is the League Cup is a great stepping stone for Newcastle, isn't it? But that won't satisfy people for long. I already wonder whether winning the League Cup and qualifying for the Champions League is enough for Alexander Isak. I'm not 100% convinced of this.
Yeah, well, we'll loop back around to Alexander Isak when we start talking about transfers and stuff in a little bit. And you know, hats off, like I say, from a very humble perspective, I didn't think Howe would manage to get Newcastle to where they are. The other two clubs that I think most people are interested in talking about a little bit are City and Arsenal and what they are going to show next year. And there doesn't seem to be any sign of Pep Guardiola throwing a tantrum and heading off into the sunset. I think we'd have heard about it if that was going to be the case. There's already talk about who City are being linked with. We've heard Gibbs White and a few others very strongly linked with them. And today, Florian Wirtz, which, you know, we'll talk about later on in the transfer section. But obviously they are going to throw a bit of money at it, and they can't be as awful as they were last year. And they're going to have their absolutely most important player back in the midfield, and they're going to have the scariest attacker in the league back, probably in something more normal form and normal service. So they're going to be a huge opposition for us next season, assuming that no judgment comes upon them, which is going to impact them. So a couple of parts to the question. First thing is, do you see an awful lot of cosmetic surgery that needs doing on that City team over the summer? And then that's assuming that everything stays the same. And then how likely do you think it is that we're going to see anything? There's rumors of massive points deductions, but that's all they are, Jan, rumors. And I've always been of the cynical opinion that their lawyers will just win it for them in the end and it'll be a fine. So if you wouldn't mind going there afterwards so we can get a feel for where you think that's going to land. But first up, much changes needed to City, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I look at that squad and I'm thinking, you know, 2-3 years ago, you couldn't pick holes in that squad. You know, you'll go, we'll have a little bit of a little bit of older than players. But now I'm looking at a group of players, and I've got a feeling that he might just decide to continue with the two centre halves that are playing together at the moment, which then means they're going to need a left back. I know they've this young kid, I can't remember his name. He's fallen into and playing left back for a little bit, but they've got no right back. I'm never convinced that Ederson is still one of the best goalkeepers in the world. I'm not convinced by that. And I look at their midfield. Obviously, Rodri coming back would be a massive big help for them. But then you've got Gundogan. He hasn't really. Bernardo Silva is another one that I'm looking at. I've never been a fan of the two wide men, Savinho and Doku. I think Mamouche, in fairness, looks a player, good energy, you know, scores a goal or two, and Erling Haaland, but I think they got a lot of work to do. It's not going to be a case of they're going to finish 20 points behind the champions next year. But whether there'll be a serious challenge, I don't know. I still think that Arsenal will be our biggest challenger next year.
So you see a world in which Pep Guardiola, who has been a serial winner for various reasons, I'm not going to denigrate what he is as a coach, but he's very much obviously had all the advantages all the time in his various club scenarios. You see a situation where you could be looking at 2 seasons back to back where he's not winning the championship. Wow, okay, that's really
Yeah,
interesting.
I do, Trevor. And also, if that's going to be the case, then it's as likely it's going to be 3 or 4. Because the longer it goes, the more difficult it becomes, and the more frustrated you get. Listen, if they can go out and sign, and they got money to spend, yeah, we can talk about the court case, but in terms of the FSR, they got loads of money they can spend because over the last few years they haven't spent an awful lot of money, and so they got loads of money they can spend. And if they can find themselves 2 or 3 unbelievable player, a bit like when they signed Bernardo Silva, when they signed Kevin Bruyne, and they get Sergio Aguero, you can find players to have that kind of impact. Great, but in reality, Trevor, when was the last time they signed? We go through the signs over the last 5 years. When was the last time they made signs? You go, okay, Erling Haaland, but that was a no-brainer, wasn't it? Everybody knew that was going to be the case. And Guardiola's done well. Well, I'm not sure he's been outstanding, but I think he's done well. This boy's coming in, and Mamouche, he's done well. But I'm looking. I think there's been so many signings. The boy from Wolverhampton, Nunez, they signed a left back, a Belgian left back, I think it was. The wide guy I mentioned before. They've signed so many players, but I'm thinking this is not like City. So why are we now all of a sudden suggesting that their next 4 signings are going to be bang on and going to take the team to the next level? Calvin Phillips is another one, isn't he? All these signings and these are not £30 million gambles, are they? These are in excess of 50 million, and you've still got it wrong. So there's nothing that makes me think, 4 years ago, Trevor, 5 years ago, they're going, oh, here they go again. They're going to spend again, and they're going to find somebody again. You know what I mean? But I'm not thinking that at the moment. I'm thinking, yeah, they'll make signings, but I don't know. So they spent money in January, over 120 million. As I said before, Mamouche looks good, but he's not an upgrade on the boy they sold to Atletico Madrid. Julian Alvarez, no way he's an upgrade on him. Kusanov, the young centre-half right back, he's one for the future. He could be absolutely anything. And then they've signed the midfield player from Portugal. I can't remember, but he looks like he looks like Fraser Forster, the goalkeeper playing in outfield. You know what I mean? He's got terrible feet. You know what I mean? So I don't know, Trevor. I mean, can you picture that Fraser Forster playing in midfield for Manchester City? I mean, you can you? So, but that's how he looks anyway. So.
It's and of course, obviously, the big one there as well to really underline your point is Grealish. So
yeah, well, there's another one, isn't it?
So
Nathan Ake and whatever. You know what I mean? They've all done okay, haven't they? But no more than okay, Trevor. This. When you're at that level, you don't want okay. You want more, better than okay.
Yeah, you're right. Gvardiol and Haaland were the 2 that I really wanted for Liverpool. But bar that, yeah, nothing too stellar in terms of that you were head scratching and thinking, oh my God, they're at it again. So yeah, very interesting, and maybe that policy will continue. And you reckon then that? Sorry, before we go to Arsenal, I don't want to put you on the spot or anything like that because nobody knows anything here really. But what's your gut feeling on how this goes and if it goes? Because there could be yet another delay in terms of any consequences from what we've been hearing about.
In terms of the court case?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't get it anymore, Trev. I mean, in March, it was a talking point at every ground I went to, and people are going, it's around the corner. Some people are saying the court case is finished. We've got all the evidence in, and it's just a matter of time before we get the verdict. I mean, surely this is the time, isn't it? Now has to be the time when the season's over before we get ourselves ready for the new season. How does it go, Trevor?
Don't know. I find it wild that people are thinking that there could be massive points deduction, stuff like that. I don't see that happening. I'm very cynical, especially when you're dealing with clubs that have all the money in the world. That the resources by the lawyers get you the results. That's how it works across the board in life and business. I just don't see anything.
It's a big own goal for the Premier League if they can't get him, isn't it? But it's going to be difficult, isn't it?
It is, and you saw how viciously City went back against the Premier League. And if that's an indicator of how it's going to go, I think people can maybe ease their expectations about City being relegated to Division 17 or something. You mentioned Arsenal will likely be a greater challenge to Liverpool's attempt to get 2 in a row next year. An awful lot of people would say that there is cosmetic surgery needed there too. One of the first people who would say it is the manager. Their own players are crying about how they need this, that, and the other. Is the big thing they need someone to put the goals away in the middle? Is it as simple as that?
No, I don't think it is. I think they can easily. I think the balance of the whole squad is slightly wrong. They need a central striker. They need a guy to play wide left with a lot of quality. They're going to need at least 2 centre midfield players. There is a rumour that the boy we want, Subimendi, is on his way to Arsenal. But if that's the case, then okay. But that's over 50 million gone already, isn't it, Trevor? So that surely is a sizable chunk of what they have available. Because I can't see Arsenal being in a position, yes, there's a Lukonga who's out on loan, and there's a Tavares who's out on loan, and Reece Nelson and whatever, and they can maybe sell them and they get a little bit of pocket money, isn't it? But I don't see where the big sells are, So maybe there isn't as much available to Arsenal. And again, in terms of the striker, obviously Arsenal, a bit like us, is getting linked with the number of strikers that there is in it. We're talking the same 4, aren't we? Basically, everybody's talking the same 4, isn't it? I can't see Alexander Isak going to Arsenal if he leaves Newcastle. I'm not saying he's going to go to Liverpool because I don't know how keen we would be, but I would be more entitled to think that Barcelona and Liverpool would be ahead of Arsenal in terms of him. We're also being linked with Benjamin Sesko. I mean, he's not somebody you look at his stats and you go, wow, I can't wait to get my hands on him. But you do watch him play and you think he's got a lot of potential. So that's probably the most likely that Arsenal will go with him. They quite like the boy Nico Williams, who plays for Bilbao right on the left, the Spanish boy. But I just don't know whether they've got that type of money to spend. So it might just be more frustrating, because the one thing we've learned this year from Arsenal is that, and I will stand by this, that the starting 11, and when everybody's playing well, is a very strong team. But beyond that, and I think that's where we don't have the same drop off when we have to dip into our squad players. And to get squad players who are good enough to compete, and Arsenal's dream every year is to compete for the Premier League and for the Champions League, and you're also going to be spending 25-30 million. I mean, Arsenal also needs a reserve goalkeeper, and they're looking at a boy at Osasuna who's going to cost 25 million euros for this. I mean, so there's more work to need to be done at Arsenal, that's for sure. But I do think that a summer without football will do everybody the world of good, won't they? But especially the teams who's had a lot of injuries, whether that's Tottenham or Arsenal, whoever they are, and then everybody comes back fresh and firing. Because I'm looking at Arsenal, I'm thinking the players that need to find their form again: Martin Odegaard, Ben White, Saka hasn't quite looked himself since he's come back. Martinelli's lost his form, hasn't he? And then you got other people coming back from injury, like Kai Havertz and whatever. He will have to find his form again, isn't it? So yeah, we'll have to see.
It's interesting to think about what they're going to look like and what evolution might happen there. The one thing that's looking like it's going to stay stable is the manager. And I think an awful lot of people would have a lot warmer feelings towards Arsenal if it wasn't for the fact that, the online presence is quite difficult to listen to. But it seems like it's led by the manager. He seems like quite an emotional type of lad, and he's quite defensive and very much us against them. And that can work for you if you're a Mourinho type figure. But he seems more like a sort of a cross between him and Guardiola. All the sort of negative aspects without much of the charisma part. And I just find that from what I can see, there's a real... He's not a very well liked lad, and as a result, the side is not a very well liked side, and it is unfortunate because they've done very well. They are a very good football team with some tremendous footballers, getting to where they got in the Champions League, likely being top 2-3 in the Premier League, with you have to say, dealing with quite a few injuries, a bit overblown as a cause for what happened to them. But they are a very, very good side. And I assume putting all those things together and the quality of the player that they have, and the fact that they do seem very loyal to this lad, that's probably why you're saying they're going to be there or thereabouts again as the biggest rivals.
I think they will be, Trevor. And just coming back to, you know, and they are getting a lot of stick, Arsenal, and there's not a lot of people like them. And I find that because when you look at people like Saliba and Declan Rice and Bukayo Saka and whatever, you know, these should be likable footballers, shouldn't they? You know, they come across as inoffensive. They're just good footballers. They're very competitive and they get on with it. The only thing I will say against Mikel Arteta is that as a player, Trevor, he was unbelievably popular, you know, amongst his teammates, the clubs that he was at. And at Arsenal, wherever people think, he is unbelievably popular. You know, people adore him. You know, you go down to Arsenal, you know, from the woman who serves the food and whatever, it's all Mikel. He's wonderful, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of respect for him. And sometimes I do wonder whether some of the things he says is a little bit of an act. You know, he says things to take the pressure away from the players and he goes, I can take it, you know what I mean? So this is a guy that was made captain of two of the clubs he played for. He's now the manager of Arsenal. So I actually happen to think that Arsenal are really, really happy with him. If they look back to where the starting point was when he came in and to where they are now, I think they're quite pleased. I know that people will point to the fact that he spent in excess of 800 million, but Arsenal will probably point to the fact that the wage bill is he's still overperforming their wage bill, and I think that's the one thing they look at and go, "We're quite happy with this boy." Well, of course, you know, he's on the clock now, isn't he? He's on the clock. And even Arsenal will be putting on the stopwatch now and going, well, okay, you know what I mean? Because we can't forever be, you know, we need to take that next step. And at some stage, you will have to evaluate whether he's the guy to do that or not. And I do doubt, I'm not 100% convinced that he's the guy to get him over the line. But I do think he's done a good job.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because the fans I see are remarkably loyal to him. They're hugely supportive. Social media has been full all week of how Arsenal have this incredible record against the top six as if it's a trophy. They're going out of their way to show how they've done well and maintain consistency. So, yeah, there's obviously a huge loyalty to this fella. Just before we get to a quick Brighton prediction, because we're not going to analyse that much too much, because clearly Arne Slot and the boys aren't analysing it too much. But there are a lot of